Badenoch.
Mr. Speaker, the end of the answer was different from the beginning of the answer. What on earth is the point of us having a lawyer rather than a leader as the Prime Minister if he can't even get the law right on a matter of national security?
All right, settle in and pour yourself a cup of tea, because what unfolded in the House of Commons can only be described as one of the most composed yet cutting exchanges in recent political memory. If British politics were a competitive sport, this would have resembled a championship final measured on the surface, but intensely sharp beneath it. There was visible tension, raised eyebrows, and the unmistakable sense that the moment had left an impression on everyone present. What we are about to examine is something rather uncommon. A parliamentary intervention delivered with such precision and control that it felt almost forensic in nature. At the center of this exchange was Kemi Badenoch, a member of Parliament who appeared to have little patience left for cautious political maneuvering, opting instead for a direct and highly structured line of argument, reminiscent of a courtroom. Cross-examination, though delivered with distinctly British restraint and parliamentary decorum. Before we turn to the footage itself, a brief request. If you find this analysis valuable, do consider liking the video and subscribing to the channel. A significant majority of viewers watch without subscribing, and while it takes only a moment, it makes a considerable difference in supporting this work. If you have already done so, thank you. It is genuinely appreciated. Now, let us return to the discussion.
Mr. Speaker, thank you for marking 4 years since the terrible murder of Sir David Amess. I know that the whole House will want to join me in remembering our former colleague. He is very much still in our hearts and minds. The way he died reminds us that the security of members and this Parliament is paramount. So it concerns us all that the case against 2 people spying on members of this House has collapsed. It is simply unbelievable. Exactly as I expected, the Prime Minister had to be dragged out at the top of PMQs to give a statement that answers no questions. I don't know what they're laughing. I don't know what they're laughing at. We are talking about the security of this Parliament. He had to be dragged out to repeat only more obfuscation. It is simply unbelievable. It is simply unbelievable that he is trying to say the last government did not classify China as a threat. So I will refresh his memory. In 2021, the previous government's integrated review described China as the biggest state-based threat to the UK's economic security. In 2024, the Minister for Security said from that dispatch box that China poses a threat. But let's leave aside the government. In 2022, the Director General of MI5 in November classified China as a threat in his remarks. How is it possible that the government failed to provide the evidence that the CPS needed to prosecute?
The substantive evidence was provided in 2023 by the previous government. That is when the witness statement was submitted. I am going to disclose it. They will all be able to read it. The substantive evidence was written and disclosed and submitted in 2023 under the last government. I noticed she didn't indicate whether ministers were involved in that at the time. Mr. Speaker, she questions what's in the review, the refreshed review in 2021 and 2023. Let me be clear. The then Foreign Secretary, sitting, I think, over here, the Honourable Member for Braintree, 1 month after the arrest, so absolutely the relevant time, gave a speech at Mansion House. It was called Our Position on China, setting out the government's policy. He said in that speech, summing up China as a threat in one word would be, his words, impossible, impractical, and most importantly, unwise. Foreign Secretary, Mr. Speaker, it wasn't just him. Mr. Speaker, the leader of the opposition was Business Secretary at the time. In September 23, the leader of the opposition said, her words, September 23, the relevant year, her words, we should certainly not be describing China as a foe. It's worth looking up the word foe in the dictionary, Mr. Speaker. She went, Mr. Speaker, it doesn't end there, Mr. Speaker. In September 2024, the leader of the opposition said this, I quote, "I have shied away from calling China a threat." She is playing politics with national security.
The Prime Minister can read the beginning of a quote. Let me finish that quote. At the end of that quote that he just read out, I did describe China as a threat. But this whataboutery that he is doing neglects the fact that those spies were charged under a Conservative government. They were let off under Labour. He has not answered any questions. On Monday, Mr. Speaker, on Monday, the Security Minister repeatedly told the House that ministers did not take decisions, that it was the Deputy National Security Advisor who had full freedom. Is the government seriously saying that only one man, the Deputy National Security Advisor, had anything to do with this failure? Is he seriously saying that the Deputy did not discuss with the National Security Advisor, did not discuss with the Home Secretary or with anyone in Downing Street? Is the Prime Minister seriously saying that?
Yes. Mr. Speaker, let me explain why. Firstly, the case was charged under the last government according to the evidence submitted under the last government, which set out their policy decision. What was an issue in the trial is not the position of the current government, the position of the last government. And they carefully avoided describing China as an enemy because that was their policy at the time. Mr. Speaker, so far as the position under this government is concerned, no minister or special advisor was involved, and I will double-check this because I've had it. I will double-check this. So, Mr. Speaker, this is important. After the charging decision, the prosecution were very careful about who would then see the witness evidence. I will double-check, Mr. Speaker, exactly what instruction was taken. But I can be absolutely clear: no minister was involved. No special advisor was involved in this, and I'm assured as I can be that the prosecution was saying that it would be the witnesses only that were involved in short updates to the evidence that was submitted under the last government.
That's not good enough. Kemi Badenoch.
Mr. Speaker, the end of the answer was different from the beginning of the answer. What on earth is the point of us having a lawyer rather than a leader as the Prime Minister if he can't even get the law right on a matter of national security? He keeps going to the CPS. The CPS have said that they are satisfied that they were right to charge in August 2024. The Sunday Times reported that Jonathan Powell, the Prime Minister's national security advisor, convened a secret meeting to discuss the security consequences of the China spy trial. Did the meeting happen, or is the Sunday Times making it up?
Mr. Speaker, she's clearly not a lawyer or a leader. Mr. Speaker. The problem for her is I do actually understand the law. I know what's got to be proven. I've also looked at the evidence. That was put in under the last government in relation to this case. There was a meeting in September. That did not involve the National Security Advisor discussing the evidence in any way, nor, Mr. Speaker, one further piece of evidence. The final statement in this case was submitted in August 2025. There was no further submission of evidence, one way or the other, after any discussion in September. This is a red herring, a completely scurrilous allegation made by the Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister has now twice directly contradicted the words of his Security Minister. They cannot both be right. The chair of the Foreign Affairs Committee couldn't get any answers from the Security Minister. The CPS said that they were satisfied that the decision to charge the case in April 2024, not August, in April 2024, was correct on the basis of where the law stood at that time. This is a matter of fact. It is not a matter of what the previous government had thought. It is not a matter of it not meeting a legal test. It did. Something must have changed when the charges were brought and when the case collapsed. The charges were brought under us. The case collapsed under them. Can the Prime Minister tell us what changed and what collapsed the case.
Mr. Speaker, I've said I will publish the witness statements in full. The whole House will then see exactly what was set out in 2023 in the substantive witness statement and exactly what was set out in the 2 supplementary witness statements, and she will then realise what she's just said is entirely baseless.
Kemi Badenoch.
Mr. Speaker, the CPS has said in the clearest terms that this prosecution was dropped because this government did not provide the statement they expected. Why should we believe a man who at the last Prime Minister's questions said he had full confidence in the best friend of a convicted paedophile? Forgive us if we don't trust a word he says. This all stinks of a cover-up. Given his statement earlier, will the Prime Minister publish today not just the government witness statements, but also the meeting minutes and all of the correspondence that he had with the CPS?
Mr. Speaker, let me be clear. The only process I want to go through is in relation to some of the individuals in the statements to make sure they know it's coming out. I can assure the House there's no substantive delay here. I know it is of concern to a number of people, acute of concern to them. I will have the statements out in full. There is a bit of proper process I need to go through. The honourable member will understand why that's necessary. Then they'll be published in full. She asks about minutes, etc. There is a usual rules and process for government. But I remind her that the substantive issues in this case were discussed at meetings under the previous government. So they're asking me to disclose the discussions that they had in relation to the witness statement in the first place.
Kemi Badenoch.
Mr. Speaker, you deserve better, and this House deserves better than the evasive answers that we have had from the Prime Minister. Even the former Cabinet Secretary, Lord Butler, has accused the government of being economical with the truth on this issue. The Prime Minister can't tell us why Jonathan Powell had a secret meeting which the Security Minister said he had no involvement in the case. He can't tell us why his government did not provide evidence that China was a threat. I suspect those statements won't prove it either. He's blaming his civil servants. He's blaming the media. He's blaming the last government. He cannot explain why he could not see this case through. He should have seen this case through. And let me be clear, Mr. Speaker, about what has happened. A serious case involving national security has collapsed because this government is too weak to stand up to China. And if the Prime Minister cannot protect the members of this House, what does that say about his ability to protect this country?
One might reasonably assume that Prime Minister's questions PMQs follows a familiar and predictable pattern: a question posed, a measured response delivered, and perhaps a chart cited in support. Yet on this occasion, the atmosphere was markedly different. The chamber was charged with tension, shaped by competing claims, apparent inconsistencies, and a strikingly methodical reconstruction of past statements. Proceedings began on a respectful note, with tribute paid to the late Sir David Ames's, a reminder of the seriousness that underpins parliamentary life. However, that tone did not endure for long. As the exchange quickly intensified, at the center of it stood Kemi Badenoch, who opened with a sober focus on the collapse of espionage-related charges, an issue that cuts to the core of national security. Her line of questioning was direct and deliberate, challenging the Prime Minister on why the evidential threshold for prosecution had not been met. Despite prior indications from the security services, the Crown Prosecution Service, and MI5 that China represents a significant and ongoing threat, she then turned to the record, revisiting the government's own 2021 integrated review, which explicitly identified China as the foremost state-based risk to economic security. Undermining any suggestion that this assessment was unclear or overstated. What followed was, in effect, a detailed presentation of prior statements and briefings, intelligence assessments, ministerial remarks, and official warnings, all reinforcing a consistent narrative. In 2022, the Director General of MI5 had publicly raised the alarm regarding Chinese activity and intervention of considerable weight. And yet, despite this accumulation of concern, the case in question ultimately failed to reach a courtroom conclusion. Badenoch then introduced a further complication. The key witness statement central to the prosecution had reportedly been submitted in 2023 under the previous administration, raising immediate questions about what had changed in the intervening period, her criticism sharpened as she addressed the government's response, characterizing it as an attempt to deflect responsibility. The Prime Minister, she suggested, appeared to place significant reliance on the autonomy of the Deputy National Security Advisor, implying that critical decisions had been taken at that level without broader consultation. Badenoch pressed the point: was it credible that such a serious matter proceeded without engagement from the Home Secretary or senior figures within Number 10? The response from the Prime Minister indicated he would review the details, but maintained that the process had been handled appropriately, an answer that did little to quell scrutiny. The exchange reached a more pointed phase when the Prime Minister sought to distinguish between the actions of the previous government and those of the current administration. Badenoch rejected that framing, noting that he had been directly involved during the relevant period and could not reasonably present himself as detached from those decisions. She then raised reports of a private meeting convened by Jonathan Powell to discuss the implications of the failed case, while the Prime Minister downplayed its significance, describing it as routine. The question remained whether the full extent of those discussions had been disclosed. In response, the Prime Minister adopted a more combative tone, questioning Badenoch's credentials, though she remained composed and continued to press the central issue. If the case was considered robust at the point charges were brought, what precisely led to its collapse thereafter? The government, to its credit, indicated a willingness to publish relevant witness material in due course. However, Badenoch argued that transparency was delayed, as it was perceived as a denial, calling for the release of additional documentation, including internal communications and records of key meetings. Perhaps the most resonant moment came as she broadened the argument beyond the specifics of the case, focusing instead on public trust. The issue, she suggested, was not solely what the government says, but whether it can be relied upon to act decisively and transparently in matters of national security, particularly when, confronting a major global power such as China. Her closing line was pointed and difficult to ignore. If the Prime Minister cannot guarantee the security of members of Parliament, what confidence can the public have in his ability to safeguard the country as a whole? The chamber fell into a subdued silence, the kind that follows a line of questioning which lands with clarity and force. What had unfolded was not merely a routine PMQs exchange, but a sustained and disciplined interrogation of government, accountability, theatrical than some might expect, yet no less impactful. It served as a reminder that, at its most effective, PMQs is not only a forum for policy debate, but a test of credibility, consistency, and leadership under pressure.